Hey guys, Harvey Cthulhu here, asking you to please consider subscribing to this channel. Doomcock is fighting a war to save pop culture, and he would really appreciate your subscription. Also, click the notification bell and give a like to the video if you like it. And if you could consider pushing the button and allowing me to escape my containment field and destroy the universe, I would really appreciate it. All right, on to the video.
My friends, I come here today not to praise Star Trek, but to bury it. After years and years of the most savage abuse from the incompetent writer's room of Alex Kurtzman and Secret Hideout, Star Trek is a hollowed-out, vivisected shell of its former self, and ViacomCBS is finally feeling the pain. They're trying to posture, to pretend that they're strong, with all sorts of articles and investor propaganda stating that things are going swell. But let's look at the metrics that are actually available for public inspection. The stock price. Beyond the wages of woke, ViacomCBS, now rebranded Paramount Global, has now dipped down even lower, with stock now sitting at about $28 a share. The day that they announced a new Star Trek movie in yet another phony and desperate funding pitch, the stock dropped roughly 20% in one day. That there is what we call a stock plunge. And it's not a good thing for the company or investors, no matter how you try to spin it. Consider this. At the investors meeting, they allegedly aired some clips of upcoming shows and whatnot. I am told from a source, although you should take it with a grain of salt, that they showed Strange New Worlds excerpts at the meeting, and that investors were not happy at seeing more of the same Kurtzman Trek, and that some outraged investors started posting those clips online, while others simply walked away in disgust when they realized that while allowing to drive Star Trek into a planet of shit at warp factor 9, investors lost about $80 a share over the past year. That's right, people. Investors are starting to do the math, and they see that while ViacomCBS has been busily giving every show and movie they make enemas of wokeness, their stock has lost much more in value than it is worth today. Indeed, just watching the stock right now for this video, I see that it is dropping even as we speak, dipping down from $28 a share to $27 a share before my very eyes. No matter how you pretend that everything's coming up roses in your financial reports, that's not good, and there's no way to spin it. Most investors aren't that dumb. Indeed, the phony announcement of yet another funding pitch for a pretend Star Trek movie may have contributed to that stock price collapse. In an article titled Star Trek Cast, including Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto returning for fourth film, they laid out a bunch of bullshit in a headline that was then contradicted within the article itself, which is funny when you think about it. But just to be clear, nothing, not a single word of that title is true at this time. That is the actual headline, and then in the first real paragraph of the article it reads, quote, Paramount is planning to enter negotiations for Star Trek stars Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Zoe Saldana, Carl Urban, John Cho, and Simon Pegg to return to the Enterprise for their fourth tour of duty in the venerable sci-fi franchise, unquote. Just in case you missed it, the phrase that was used was, quote, planning to enter negotiations, unquote. Aha! So they're not actually in negotiations, they are planning to enter negotiations. Yeah, and I'm planning to do my laundry, but right now, it stinks. Planning to enter negotiations. That means zippity-doo-dah, there is no film coming out anytime soon. The article suggests they will begin filming by the end of the year. They haven't signed a single actor. They haven't even talked to a single actor. They are planning to enter negotiations. Well, hell, I'm planning to enter negotiations to release Harvey.
You are?
Of course not. But see how hopeful you were just then? Clickbait!
Fuck you, Doomcock!
All Star Trek fans are fucked, Harvey. And no silly BS funding pitch is going to fix that now. This is all just made up pie in the sky bullshit. The article goes on to say Paramount was close to bringing back this cast once before. In 2018, S.J. Clarkson of Jessica Jones had signed up to direct a sequel that would have reunited Pines Kirk with his late father, played by Chris Hemsworth, reprising his performance from the 2009 Star Trek. That film never materialized, however, after Paramount reportedly couldn't close a deal with Pine and Hemsworth. Well, at least in that one, they were actually talking to Hemsworth, not planning to enter negotiations. This is such a clickbait trick to see how many views this article gets. Of course, dozens of other sites picked up on this BS and reported it as fact. It's not. It's just pie in the sky, contradicted by itself. And that may well be a contributing factor as to why the stock dropped 20% in a day, but drop it did, and dead Star Trek is. Other than the stock, there are other signs of distress here, signs that reality may be finally catching up to Paramount Global, which is what ViacomCBS is calling itself these days. The rebranding alone is in and of itself a very bad sign for the company, since companies don't rebrand themselves unless something is terribly wrong. I mean, look at Facebook trying to rebrand itself Meta after a series of devastating revelations about how badly Facebook is harming kids, families, and society in general. Paramount Global has lost Star Trek, and thankfully they're paying for it as their stock spirals down the porcelain vortex. They were warned, and they ignored the warnings. And as they prepare to double down on the very disease that killed Star Trek, namely Kurtzmanism, ignoring the fact that they literally destroyed the entire Star Trek universe in Star Trek Picard, when an advanced AI civilization sterilized the Star Trek universe of all life, even though now Paramount is pretending that they didn't, I've decided that ignoring the situation isn't helping anything, and so I've decided to deliver a eulogy for the very Star Trek they killed. My friends, amid the smoldering wreckage of their stock decline and the ashes of Paramount stock profits, please remove your hats as I deliver a few words over the grave of Star Trek. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to pay our final respects to the dead franchise formerly known as Star Trek. In 1966, Gene Roddenberry boldly went where no show had gone before, into a better, brighter future where all beings, regardless of race, sex, or species, were held to be equal. Civilization was no longer dominated by prejudice, war, and greed, and mankind had realized its potential at last, had reached for the stars and attained them. Now, Alex Kurtzman and Secret Hideout have managed once again to take Star Trek where it had never been before, in the grave. Star Trek Discovery is the exact opposite of everything that Gene Roddenberry stood for. In place of optimism, we have the ugliness of eye gougings and F-bombs. In place of intelligence, we have sonar in the vacuum of space. In place of the heroes that made Star Trek legendary throughout the world, we have a smug mutineer that points a phaser at herself. With a staff so completely ignorant of Star Trek, no one can even tell which end of a phaser is which. To call Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard losers is to slight the very concept of loss, as it is not every day that a franchise gets turned from a golden goose into a dead duck. But that's where we are today, gathered together to bury a once mighty franchise, to plant it in the ground, in the hope that Kurtzman and his merry band of cultural vandals will finally stop sodomizing it. To that end, we're burying Star Trek 10 feet under, just to be sure that even with a strap on, it may finally be out of reach and may rest unmolested. Before we get to the worst of it, let's pause for a moment and say farewell to Jean-Luc Picard, whom Secret Hideout particularly savaged to the point where many fans can't even enjoy watching Picard in Next Generation reruns. So completely did the Secret Hideout team desecrate his memory. The dictionary defines the word toaster as an instrument or appliance for toasting bread. At the end of Star Trek Picard, Jean-Luc Picard was turned into an android with all the charisma of a toaster and none of the usefulness. They killed Picard on that show, and for about 7 minutes, people mourned until after the next commercial, when they brought back a duplicate of Picard and put him inside a mechanical body, a toaster if you will, albeit a toaster that doesn't even make toast. A toaster that doesn't make toast is useful only as a doorstop, but since doors open automatically, even in the twisted, bizarro version of Starfleet created by Kurtzman, Picard is completely useless as a toaster, a man, or a doorstop. In Star Trek Picard, Stewart limped and stumbled through a nonsensical universe riddled with plot holes, magical gizmos based on pixie dust and mushrooms, and ludicrously inept scripts. And all Picard did was grovel and apologize and snivel and whine to an insufferable degree. At the end of the show, Soji called the machine entities who were determined to wipe out all life in the universe to come and wipe out all life in the universe. As they were coming through the portal, she hung up on them, hung up the phone on them, the phone that they helped her design by plans left behind. But of course, being millennia ahead of us in technology, they didn't need her help getting here, so when she hung up on them, they just hit star 69, returned, and wiped out all life in Star Trek. So everything moving forward in this franchise now is fan fiction about a dead universe, a universe the writers themselves killed without realizing it. There can be no season 2 of Star Trek Picard because the incompetent writers allowed the universe to be annihilated by super high-tech AIs. Star Trek Picard literally destroyed the entire Star Trek universe, and the only fans who don't realize that are the ones as dumb as the writers who can't think past the last commercial break. But in real life, Star Trek was dead long before Star Trek Picard aired. Star Trek Discovery killed Star Trek years ago. What can you say about Star Trek Discovery that hasn't already been said about anal warts? Unfortunately, ViacomCBS waited too long to diagnose the bespectacled polyp that created this mess, and now it's too late. The patient died from what could have been a simple pain in the ass if it had been caught early enough. After the Vulcan suicide terrorist, after the sonar in space, after ramming a sister Spock never had down our throats, after Mikey Spock famously pointed the phaser at herself, and the editors let that air because no one on the show, cast, crew, or writer's room has a fucking clue about anything to do with actual Star Trek. After all those signs of terminal disease, they could have maybe cut out the infection before it metastasized, but no. No, saying the bleeding lumps and cries of pain from the fandom were no big deal. They went ahead and doubled down with severed baby heads, eyeball gouging, and human DNA mixed in with tribbles that were then fed to children, because Kurtzman can't tell the difference between comedy and Khmer Rouge Cambodia. And by the time ViacomCBS realized, hey, maybe we shouldn't have allowed our most valuable intellectual property to be sodomized to death, well, it was too late. Star Trek is dead, and ViacomCBS is only just realizing how bad things have gotten. Rumor has it they want to sell Star Trek, but it's too late for them to sell anything Star Trek related, other than organs on the black market, which is another reason we're burying it nice and deep today, just in case they're as incompetent with shovels as they are with scripts. Star Trek Discovery is the worst show in human history. Star Trek deserved better than this disgraceful and ignominious end, and so did stockholders. But alas, they're finally realizing as the stock plummets, the wages of woke is death. To say that Star Trek Discovery has gone down like the Hindenburg is to give Burning Alive a bad name. Kurtzman and his merry band of cultural vandals may try to say bursting into flames isn't a bug, it's a feature. But fans know the difference between a warm feeling and being burned at the stake. Star Trek Discovery, you killed one of the noblest and most optimistic stories in the history of mankind. Born at a time when humanity seemed destined for a radioactive grave, Star Trek inspired countless scientists, artists, politicians, and humanists to do better, dream bigger, and hope for a better tomorrow. The best that Star Trek Discovery can do is tell us, this is the power of math, people. I like science, and shut up and eat your human DNA-laced tribbles, hair and all. Star Trek Discovery and those incompetent, indifferent souls responsible for it have taken Gene Roddenberry's dream and used it for toilet paper. Star Trek Discovery killed that optimism, ruined that beautiful spark of intelligence, destroyed our beloved childhood memories. It reduced Spock to a dyslexic show-tune singing never-had-a-sister hipster douchebag with pointed ears and a beard. Secret Hideout, you turned Tribbles into human-infused cereal, and you have now spun off 3 other shows of equal malice and stupidity. But in truth, Star Trek Discovery, you are deader than Elvis, deader than Meatloaf, and deader than Section 31. Rest in pieces, Star Trek, for pieces are all that remain of this broken franchise. Friends, fans, countrymen, lend me your ears. We come not to insult Star Trek Discovery, but to bury it. Thus, in conclusion, let us pray. Space, the terminal frontier. These were the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Before your mission was sabotaged, you explored strange new worlds. You sought out new life and new civilizations. You boldly went where no man had gone before. May you rest in peace, Star Trek. We will remember you. And I'm sure that investors will remember who to blame for stock that has dropped to $28 a share. From the center of the earth, this is Dictor Van Doomcock bidding you all, my friends, stay angry. Ha 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 ha.